Listen up. There's no more excuses. We're empowering those who want the hustle by exposing the status quo.
The days of ordinary are over.
It's time to crush mediocrity and start discovering your greatest potential.
Welcome to the Hustle Nation. To the Hustle Nation. To the Hustle Nation. To the Hustle Nation.
Welcome back to another episode of the Hustle Nation podcast. Today, as always, we've got a real treat. Mr. Mark De Grasse is in the house. Mark is founder at AI Branding Academy, and like me, you may know him from his previous work at The Digital Marketer. Mark, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Exciting to have you. You're certainly immersed in the AI world, which I know we love to talk about, we love to learn about. But before we go there, tell our audience a little bit more about what you do and how you got to where you are now.
Sure. I've been in marketing and kind of business development for the last 20 years, alternating between owning businesses and taking executive roles. Basically, whenever I found some skill set I was lacking, I would just get a job to learn it, and then I just use it in the next company. 20 years of that. I've built some businesses, sold some businesses. I'm in Texas right now because I had a magazine. It was basically an e-commerce business that was supported by a magazine for content marketing. I sold that to a company called On It out here, one of Joe Rogan's companies. And I built their content platform, wrote a book about the process, started an agency, helped about 300 businesses build their brands, and then I got the job at digitalmarketer.com as the president and built their content cert and social media certification. So now what I'm doing is essentially everything I've always done, which is trying to help small businesses to excel and really compete with the big guys. Because I think, a lot of the problems we have today are because of the big guys. If you really look at the monopolies and so my theory was that if I can elevate small business to a certain extent, then they could compete, at least on a brand level, with the big guys. And now people would consider them as, viable suppliers and hopefully replace, the big companies with small companies. So that's the overall goal. It's ambitious, but I'm working on it.
So Mark, I'm curious, you alluded to the fact that, or you simply stated the fact that you started taking roles as a way to learn. Curious, what kind of drove that? That's most people don't look at it that way, right? They're looking for their next business, especially someone that is an entrepreneur like yourself. They're just looking always for their next gig, and to kind of have that view of, I'm going to skill up before I tackle that next thing. Just curious, like how did you get there? What kind of drove that thinking?
Oh man, I've been like that my entire life. I've always been like a self-assessor. And so if I was lacking in something, I would just try to learn it. Like I was in, I think it was high school and junior high. Every summer I try to learn a skill. So I'd be like, hey, I'm going to be woodworking this summer. And then, so I learned how to woodwork, and then I'd be, stained glass looks cool. And so I learned stained glass, learned how to cook, learned yoga, learned a whole bunch of different skills. And so I was always just trying to acknowledge, like, okay, where's my weakness and how can I fix it? And one of my biggest weaknesses I realized was, in terms of business, was my introversion, where I was basically had anxiety, depression. And I realized, like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be able to succeed in business if I can't communicate with people. And so when I was 18, I actually became a real estate agent in LA, which was, I don't know why I do this, but I basically go with the harshest, most dramatic solution I could find. And I could give a bunch of stories of that happening. But yeah, so I was like, okay, well, if I'm in real estate, which is like a sales profession, I'll have to learn how to, deal with people. So I did open houses and cold calling and all that kind of stuff. And eventually got sort of over it. But this kind of process has been lifelong, where it's basically like I look for solutions, and my way of looking for solutions isn't to say like, okay, I'll try this. This is going to be the solution. I try not to qualify solutions because I'm obviously ignorant of what the solution is. Otherwise, I'd be doing it. So I just do everything. So and I could give you my whole, personal transformation I had over the last 2 years, which was the same thing, basically starting over and then trying everything and then figuring it out eventually. It's not an efficient way, but you do learn a lot.
Well, let's talk about that transformation, because from the outside looking in, you've built multiple companies, you've run multiple companies. It's easy for someone like me to say, why would you need a transformation at your level of success and where you are in your career?
Yeah, well, you know what's funny is I've actually my podcast, podcast Mark, my personal podcast. I was really to interview guys I know that were seen as super successful and really expose that like, hey, we're all effed up, because that's really the fact of the matter. Like nobody really has it together, and your perception of somebody is
Fair.
kind of like just your perception of somebody. Like it has very little to do with reality unless you take the time to actually get to know somebody. But most of the time, what you'll realize is that no matter what level you are, and I went through this too, because I grew up around a lot of successful men, and that was always what I saw. And I was like, that looks cool that you've accomplished so much, but you also seem super depressed, or you also have these issues, or money itself has actually led to these other issues, which are things that people who don't have money don't have to deal with. So who actually has it made? So yeah, no, it's I'm so screwed up. But it's different ways, because I think professionally what happened to me was I climbed the ladder, tried to do all these things, and then at the top, or what I thought was the top, where I was like, okay, I'm the president of a 7-8 figure company. I'm doing all this stuff, and I have the house, and I have the at the time I had like a horse, and it was kind of like a cool little 3-acre property. And I had the cars and I had all the stuff, and then I realized like, man, there's no happiness here. You get to the top of the mountain and realize that it's not there, the thing that you were trying to get the entire time. And so at that time, that's when I have my reset, I call them. And then I don't qualify the solution. And so at that point I started, I gave up alcohol. I ran a marathon, started doing Kundalini yoga, started cold dipping, and, different types of therapy, Bible groups, basically everything. And then within about 2 years, it took me 2 years to do. Then I had this big, I call it Kundalini awakening. I don't know if that's what it actually was, but basically this really intense ego death that allowed me to realize that the last 39 years had been, and that's what happened. I was 39, had been really hard, and I hadn't accomplished what I was looking for. And now I was awake to that. And so at that point, and actually the crazy thing is, the actual thing that triggered it all was a gut biome check, where I realized that I was basically allergic to 100 foods, and I had been basically at IBS for about 25 years, ever since I was 15, and I kind of got in this funk, and it turns out I was just allergic to everything. And so then I just had to give up beef, pork, eggs, broccoli, spinach, my entire diet again. And then, but even with that, because I kind of consider myself a foodie, I do have a food or a donut blog called youdon'tknow.com, and so that wasn't even, I loved food was like awesome, but no, I was miserable the entire time. I was very uncomfortable. So anyways, I don't know if that answers your question, but no, nobody has it together.
Well, I want to hit on that. You talk about the no one has it together, and you talk about your ego death and things like that. And I'm curious your lens, because you're absolutely right. I think so many people from the outside in see people a certain way, in a lot of different ways. So like one thing we've talked about is a lot of people look at successful people and be like, man, they were an overnight success. And then you find out it was 15 years of grind. Right. But then even when they're seemingly at the top, they're at the top in one domain, right? It's more often than not, when somebody's at the pinnacle of one domain, they might be literally crashing in another. And so just curious about, from a mindset perspective, as you talk about your ego death and kind of your transformation and things like that. When did that kind of start to come up, that, you can be a success over here, but if you're a failure over here, then what really is success anymore?
Oh, that's a great question. And it's, I was really just going through those cycles of like, okay, I accomplished the thing, but I'm also still unhappy. And that's, it's just a balance, you go into like the yin and yang, and, all the spiritual stuff that as business people, I pushed off for my whole life. But now I realize, I'm like, no, it's always a balance. And if you're, sacrificing, or if you're pushing in one area, you're probably letting another area go. And can you make it all balanced? I don't think so. At this point, I just go through cycles of like, okay, this is a hard work cycle. I have to focus on work. And then, okay, this is a hard family cycle. I need to focus on family. And I think the ideal scenario is that you're able to progress all the areas without letting one fall off a cliff. Which is super difficult. But I think the most successful people, if you really look at them like, okay, that person looks happy financially, they look happy in their marriage, they look happy with their kids, they are pillars of their community, like that looks pretty balanced. But then again, you hear those horrible stories of like, oh yeah, the guy was the mayor of the town, everybody loved him. Turns out he had this in his basement, and you're like, oh my gosh, that's a bad way to balance all that other stuff.
Well, it's interesting because I talk a lot about, I hate the word work-life balance because there's no one that's ever said work-life balance and wanted to work less or wanted to work more.
Yeah.
Right. And the point is and to your point of the balance, I don't think it exists either in the way that people think of it. Like, I think most people think that we can have balance day in and day out, week in and week out, month in and month out, year in and year out in all the different domains. And I'm the same way. I've never seen a successful person that has had that. They have insane imbalance in certain phases of life. Right. And so to your point, like, I think it's interesting, even just how you phrase it. You went through this incredible transformation, tried all of these things, and you said it was incredibly inefficient because it took you 2 years. When in reality, if I could be sitting here today and I'd say I could have a complete transformation in my entire life, accomplish everything that I, position myself for my future, and all it's going to take me is 2 years to figure it out, like, that's actually super efficient.
Well, what's funny though is you think that the thing I'm trying to accomplish is like, okay, I need all this stuff or balance and all that. You're wrong. Because the more awake you get and the more kind of aware of yourself, your entire perception of success will completely just go out the window. Like, things that you thought were symbols of success, you'll be like, that's so lame and sad. Like, I was, and not anything against private jets, but like the pictures of the guys like, look at me from my private jet. And you're just like, shut up. Like, seriously, like, you know how much money it costs to run, say, like a G6? Like, you're talking, the plane itself might be $5-10 million, but you're talking like $1 million to $2 million a year in operating expenses. Like, the amount of money you have to be like, I need a private jet. You're talking like a billionaire level. So all these people who are like, oh, look at me fly around. Shut up, And so that's the kind of stuff where I'm like, no, that's not successful. And that's really why I started doing all my marketing stuff, because I saw this deception and manipulation happening where it's like, oh, hey, I'll convince everybody with this little tip. And then actually I make all my money off of selling people on how to be successful. It's like, wait, that's totally fraudulent. And so, and I do have a kind of obsession with efficiency and honesty. Those are kind of like my core pillars. And so when there's violations of that, I'm like, no, and stop trying to trick people. That's bad. As marketers, I think our one job is really just like sign pointers. Like, hey, you guys have a problem over here. And guess what? Bill has a solution. So you could go talk to Bill. Like, that's literally the job that marketers are supposed to do. But instead, we're kind of like, hey, Bill, what do you have to sell? Okay, let's see what suckers we could get to buy this thing. And it's like, oh my gosh, that's how we've operated. Like, it's horrible. But, this kind of drive for profits and, the greed that has kind of taken over everything. But look what it's led to. It's like, oh yeah, we have a few super rich people. Everybody else is miserable. And honestly, we're all out of whack with our work lives. And so anyways, but the perception of success. So right now, like, success for me, I have an autistic 12-year-old son. I have two sons, one 11, Declan, and then Damien, severely autistic 12-year-old. They basically has like the mentality and decision making ability of like a 2 or 3-year-old, and he's nonverbal. And so for us, like, I know he's never going to leave us. We know what the home system is like if you try to not have to take care of your autistic child, and we're not doing that. And so I'm like, if I have to work at McDonald's to make sure that he doesn't have to go to that, that's what I'll do. And so, but I have to think like this for my entire life. And actually, he was the impetus for the big transformation, because I was like, well, if I keep going like this, hustling, super hard, then I'm going to die, and it's not going to be in the far future. And I'm not going to have anything set up. So now I'm kind of like, okay, I can't predict what's going to happen with, say, business, and I can't predict what's going to happen with the economy. I can't predict all these things, but I can build myself up and I can stay alive and healthy. And then I'll be able to support, my family and my son specifically, no matter what happens. So for me, success is like setting up enough passive income streams where it's like, I don't have to be 100% healthy and hustling for the rest of my life. And I can take care of everything. It's hard.
Well, and I love how you said that, because Chris and I have talked about this at length. When a lot of people think, why do a lot of people have a negative connotation to the word hustle? It's because you align it to burnout. And it's because so many people, when they're talking about hustle, it's not aligned with their true why. It's not with like what really is going to actually be successful. And that's hard to find out, right? Like, I don't think people are hustling just like you weren't, right? Like, you weren't trying to go away from what was your core why. You just hadn't figured it out yet. Right. And I share a story of when I was seemingly from the outside, maybe at a pinnacle. I was just new CEO, having a lot of success, all this sort of stuff. But I was broken. Because I was all in on one category and kind of everything else was falling apart. And I remember kind of my breaking point was when I already had no time, I already had no ability to do anything. My wife basically called me out and said that I was missing my kids' childhood. And the next day I decided to volunteer to be my kids' basketball coach, which I didn't have the time to do. Right. So I actually made the problem worse, but I suddenly felt better because it was actually aligned with what I actually wanted to do. Right. Wow. And you're so right. Like when you're cranking it in a direction that just doesn't align with that, it's almost like you get faster to burn out.
Oh, it's so true. Well, and your story is exactly what I would do too. Where it's like, okay, well, for me, like, I try to know myself, and I'm like, okay, I know my interests and my discipline level and the things that I can handle. And so I'll kind of hack my own system by doing something like that. Like, I have to spend more time with my kids. And I know I'm not going to do that if it's something like a voluntary thing. I have to commit to something. And so I'm going to do this. It's like when I ran the marathon. It was actually after I spoke to my therapist. And she's like, you have to like do something independent of, your family. At the time, we were raising my wife's nephew, who came live with us for like a year and a half. And he was a handful. My kids were younger at the time, and he was 13, 12, 13. And it was hard. And so I needed something. I was like, I just gotta get away. She's like, oh, well, you should just do something that you could only do with just you. And I was like, oh, well, if I run really far, like, nobody could keep up with that. And then I signed up for a marathon like that night. I was like, and it was 3 months away. And I was like, it'll be fine. Like, it'll just make me have to do the thing more. And so, I know exactly what you were thinking there. But even if it didn't work 100%, I'm sure it got you on the right track. Like, okay, this is what it means to show up, kind of thing.
That's exactly. Well, to your point, it got me to show up. Number one, it didn't solve my other problem of how the hell am I going to, get everything else accomplished. But scarcity always drives innovation, right? And so it actually pushed me to another level of scarcity that I had to figure something out. Like, there literally was not going to be a way that I could continue to do what I was doing and execute this. But because it was more aligned with my why, it was so much easier to reprioritize all the other stuff, right? Because it's like, all right, well, this is it. This is now, this is the number one thing. I've now made this commitment to not only just my kid, but it was to other kids, right? So once you make that commitment, you have to show up.
Yep. Well, and I hate to say it, but I think the way we've kind of, fit ourselves into the box of having to work our whole lives after school and provide and do these things, like, we have to have a structure like that. Because if it's just like a voluntary, like, oh, you should take, the kids to the park or something, like, I can't function like that. I need deadlines and I need, schedule. And if it's not on the schedule, like, there's a good chance I'm going to fill that time with just more work, and not even the right work. I still struggle with that too, where I'm like, oh man, I really got to get that big project done. But I could use this new section on my website to support that project. And so I'm going to build a 50-page database, and then I'll get to that. It's necessary. Yep. So I'll do this building up the stones to get to the right point. Anyways, it's bad.
Yeah.
and you
What's
need
your
to
point? No one has it together, right? That's
no,
the point.
well, and there's all I think we're always battling ourselves is really what's happening, because it's like I think for me personally, like I grew up very Catholic, went to Catholic schools, went through all the sacraments. I was literally my school was run by friars. We had Brother Joel was the disciplinarian. And it was really difficult, but we basically, you get hammered into like these programs and you don't realize it until you kind of wake up I think you have to get older, it's really what happens. Then you could reflect on the past. And during my transformation stuff, I got really good at, meditation and breath work. And what you're able to do is essentially, or how I do it, I think of emotions and I say, okay, here's how I feel about something. And then I'll go through every instance of memory that I could remember feeling that way. And when you do good meditation, you're actually able to get really deep and go like, oh my gosh, turns out I feel this way about that because that brat when I was in second grade knocked me over during the soccer game. And and then you realize like, oh my gosh, the basis of all your decisions was actually this experience you had when you were 7 and you haven't revisited it, and you keep on operating on it, and you're like, oh my gosh, that's so ridiculous. And it's kind of like a mush together of what is it, shadow work. Shadow work is a technique of doing this kind of regression to find out where your feelings actually come from, heal the inner child, and then you can move forward. It's not easy. You just don't know where the programming is. And so a lot of times, that's why, when you talk about like the self-development stuff, it always comes back to like reflection, which is the hardest thing to do if you're programmed to just go all the time. So yeah, it's tough. You have to take time. And that's really what I found was like, okay, I need to do the meditation. I need to do all these things that I thought were, too much time. Like, I don't have time to do this. I should be working. I should be hanging out with the kids. I should be doing all that stuff. And I'm like, the more I've kind of done it, the more I'm like, no, self-development is not it's not selfish, because that's what a lot of, working guys would say, like, you're being selfish. You're taking too much time for you. And I'm like, no, technically it's not selfish, because the person you're working on doesn't exist yet, because you get no benefit from it right now. But future you, which is kind of a different person, they're getting the benefit. So you doing the self-development stuff is actually not selfish one, and contributes to a person that you should love the most. We never say that, but you should first, and then you can love everybody else. So,
I actually think you have to be selfish to be selfless, but that's just me. You have to take time for self-care and all those things. What's up, listeners? I just wanted to say thank you for being a part of the Hustle Nation community. We are absolutely thrilled and honored that you listen to our show. I wanted to take a break to share a special resource with you. I'm talking about our 2020 Vision Guide. This is a pivotal tool we use in our workshops, where participants typically invest thousands of dollars for transformative experiences. Imagine having a crystal clear, actionable roadmap to not just meet, but exceed your personal and professional goals. That's the power of the 2020 Vision Guide. And here's the best part. We're offering it to you for free. This is your chance to leverage a tool that has propelled hundreds of people achieve unparalleled success. Visit our website now. I'm including the URL in the show notes below, where you can download our guide and start your journey toward clarity and achievement. Don't wait. It's time to create the life you deserve today. Now back to the show. Mark, I want to go back. Speaking of reflection, you mentioned that you've been in a lot of different spaces in your career, but a lot of it has been through marketing. And I'm curious at what point did you become interested in marketing, or did you know that you were going to have a strong future here in this industry?
Oh, no. I didn't even know it was related to marketing. What I was interested in was business development. And so actually the only reason I went to college was not for like the degree. I went there to learn. because I was like, well, I'm going to have a business this whole time while I'm going to college. Like I'll get lessons and I'll use in the business. So I went for business development. It was technically HR with a minor in entrepreneurship, but it was basically like how to manage businesses and develop business plans. And so that's really what I wanted. And I was part of a club where we would actually help these small businesses while I was in college. And that's where it came from. But the more I got into it, the more I realized I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like everything is marketing or everything is branding. Because if you could set up your brand correctly, then that should actually be the source of all your decision making. And so all business development isn't, how do I build this team that can put everything together? It's like, no, that's how you build a really inconsistent business. What it really is how can you set the vision in place for what you're actually trying to achieve, the purpose behind the business, and then derive all the decisions from that one piece. And then now you get the consistency. Now you get the less volatility because you're not relying on, this delegation of decision making, which is what we've had to do. But yeah, no, it's everything is marketing, like literally. And so what I was doing, I just came out with my book, Always on Brand. But what I did was kind of look through all of history. I'm like, okay, where does branding and marketing kind of fit in with history? And what I realized, it's like, oh my gosh, it's the foundation. Because honestly, if you can't take an idea, like if you think of, say, religion, religion's a very pivotal piece. And you say, I can't convince one person to believe the thing that I'm saying. Like you can't do that without branding and marketing. You have to convince somebody. And then that person has to convince somebody. And then that person. So branding is actually just recognition of a concept. And if you get everybody to adopt that, now you've succeeded. Now you could build a religion. Now you could build a government. Now you could build an army. Now you could build a business, of course, or technology. Technology is the same way. Because what I found was I was like, okay, is it the best product that wins? Is it the best service that wins? And you're like, no, McDonald's makes crap hamburgers. Starbucks is trash. Why is it so successful? And I'm like, oh, all it is consistency and recognition. And if you could build those two things, you could expand anywhere you want. And the idea doesn't actually have to be good. It could be crap. And that's why we end up with the situation we're in right now, where it's like the people who had the best idea were not the best branders and marketers. And so, I'm sorry, that doesn't work. The person who had the amazing invention, cars that run on water, that's a little different situation. You're facing an uphill battle with ousting some current industries. But let's just say I don't have the right branding for that, and so it doesn't get successful. And so you'll see this throughout history with most of our products and technologies, where it's like, wow, that was a much better solution. Electric cars were actually made before gas cars. A lot of people don't know that, but they were around first, and they were way more efficient. And then, oh, look, we don't know what to do with this toxic byproduct called gasoline, which, we were making on accident and dumping into rivers because we were trying to make kerosene, but what can we do with, it's explosive. Oh, combustion engines. Let's just put a bunch of explosions in a box, and then we'll put the toxic stuff in the back, and all of a sudden, oh, look, we got powerful cars. But yeah, and then you oust the technology that was there, which was electric cars. And now we're coming full circle. So anyways, I don't know if that answers your question. But
that's a phenomenal answer. I love the way you talk about branding and marketing together. But I'm curious about how you see marketing and sales, and whether you want to attach branding to that or not. Because I've always said, and I believe that sales needs marketing as much as marketing needs sales, and together you have a phenomenal marriage where a company can be successful. And that may not be as true for like a McDonald's or a Starbucks because they're B2C, but maybe more specifically in the B2B space.
Oh, huge. Well, I think moving forward, and this is really because of AI, it's pivotal. The sales department is going to become so vital because all of these automations happening with AI are going to make people want to seek out humans for answers. Now, are you not going to have AI for maybe the first step of a process? No, you definitely want lead qualification if that's going to speed up the salespeople and allow them to work on just the people they should be talking to. But most of the time, it's like, no, everybody's going to be craving human interaction for specific areas. Now, there's a lot of times when you don't want to talk to a sales person where, you might be a small business, maybe you're a car lot, and people aren't calling the car lot because they know if they call on that Honda Civic in the front, then, Bob, the salesperson, is going to say, oh, no, it's sold. But guess what? We have something in the back. Come on down. And you're like, oh, my God, I just want to know the price and the mileage. Like, what's going on? In that case, like, I think AI may take over some of those. But for the most part, when it comes to actually making big decisions, I think people are going to be like, you know what? I don't want to talk to a robot. I need a person. And so I think the sales role is going to become even more vital. The in-person role is going to become more vital. And that's mainly because there's going to be so many fakes out there. Like, pretty soon, you're not going to know whether the person contacting you, and this is actually even today, you look on LinkedIn and you get messages all the time and you're like, I don't know if that's a person. And if it is, that's a person I know, but I don't think they would send me that message. So I think I'm on an automation. And that's already happening. So just take that to the next level where you have every interaction you have with a salesperson, and it turns out that salesperson's fake. Some people are going to wholeheartedly reject that. And so it's going to be even more vital for salespeople. But on the branding side, what we try to say is that, no impression that you make on a potential customer or existing customer matters if it's not branded, because that's just an individual experience. And what I found was that most companies were essentially setting up a new brand every time they needed to take action on something. Like, oh, hey, we're doing this event coming up. How should we run the event? I don't know. Let's sit in a big room with a stupid whiteboard and write a cloud in the middle, and everybody throw out ideas. And Cindy, the intern, could do it too, and Bob from IT, who has terrible ideas, he could do it too. And then you basically create a whole new brand out of a bunch of committee decisions, and it's terrible. So if you could centralize, again, the decision making, and then provide your salespeople with not just, and the branding side goes really deep, where it's like not just, okay, here's the branding parameters for the salespeople. It's like, no, let's put the branding parameters before we hire the salespeople. How can we integrate the entire onboarding process using our brand values as the base? Okay, now we find the right people for the job. Okay, you got the right people. All right, well, how should they pitch? Okay, well, let's take a look at the branding values, and they could tweak this however they want, but they have to stick within these parameters. We say these things. Our business is about this. We do not do that. And so now they have rules to operate in. Now they can be themselves, and they're the right person for the job because we hired them correctly. And now they could get to work. Now, on top of that, AI could automate a bunch of their data entry crap. We're just going to have AI record their Zoom call, and it's going to run a prompt in the transcript that allows them to pull out the action items. And they know, based on our branding parameters, that they should have 3 action items for every sales phone call. We always schedule the next call. We always send the, big PDF. We always, make sure that Sally sends them cookies. And then all of that's automated. And so now the salesperson can do more sales and not have to worry about the drudgery of, oh crap, Salesforce. Oh, it's Friday. I'm supposed to put in the report. I hate doing this. I have notes everywhere, whatever. And then, so, and that's kind of how we've all operated. But the way I see sales now is like, oh man, sales is going to be able to be cranking. And now all these guys, and women that want to, just be on the phone. Just give me leads. Just make me talk to somebody. That's what they all want. And now they'll be able to do that. And it'll be much better if they stay on.
Mark, you talk about this and you make it sound so easy. Now, I've used AI. We embrace AI quite a bit, Dustin and I. However, there are probably a lot of people listening to the show who say, I haven't gotten into this yet, or I haven't gotten as far as you're talking about with these automations. How difficult and or expensive? What does this look like if a company wants to adopt some of these things you're talking about?
It just depends on how much they want to work at it. You do need somebody who's kind of capable of processes, because currently there's a concept called AI agents, where basically an AI will be able to manipulate multiple apps. So right now, if you want to do something with AI, okay, I got to go to chatgpt.com. Yeah, I could run some prompts, but it doesn't do anything. What the next level is going to be, hey, I need to, process a podcast, and I go through this too, where I'm like, okay, I need to edit the video one. I need to pull out the short form video. I need to write the copy. I need to come up with a title. I need to do a square thumbnail and a landscape thumbnail. I need to post to YouTube. I need to post to Buzzsprout. And then I need to post to all my social media channels that this episode is out. And I need to send a package to the guest that has all of the assets so they know how to share it. Oh my gosh, that's like 1,000 tasks. So
How did
AI
you know I
agent,
needed help with that?
man, well, I'm writing a course on it, and I'm like, oh my gosh, how can I make this simpler for people? But what AI agents will essentially be able to do is record you doing the things, and then it'll integrate with AI to figure out exactly what you did and why. And then you could say, hey, go do the thing again, except start with this raw file instead of that raw file. And then it'll manipulate all of the apps, do all of the things, and you come out with the package at the end. That's the advanced stuff. Currently, what you do and what every business should start to do is just really document your processes. What's the most efficient way to do this? How do we create the title? And this is where the branding side comes in and why I decided to focus on it. Because I was like, man, if you could just set your branding parameters, now you could just ask the AI to do, the brand integration. So instead of you sitting there saying, oh, how do I name this podcast title? And it's like, no, well, you name the podcast title because you always have the guest name in there. You always put an interesting keyword that could relate to something people are searching. Plus, you need the branding component. So we're going to use the word wowza because that's what we put in every single title. And then all of a sudden, oh, wow, look, they're all on brand. And you might say like, well, that's kind of boring. Where's the creativity? Nobody wants that in this instance. What people want is consistency. That's how people subscribe. People don't subscribe to one viral video. They subscribe to the person that keeps on popping up. And oh man, every time I see them, they're always saying something interesting about RC airplanes. And I love RC airplanes. And so I've seen enough. Now I'm going to subscribe. And so that's the big tricky part with marketing is we always want to be innovating. But the thing that we actually need is just consistency. And then boring repetition, because that's really what people want. They want to feel safe, and this goes to like our instinctual nature as humans. Like we need safety. We scan our surroundings for predators. We want to know where everything is because that makes us feel comfortable. And so with branding, all you have to do is cater to that. Hey, you saw that last video and it was a funny video about cats. Oh, guess what? Here's another funny video about cats. You're like, it's too obvious, That's the creative side of us. That's like, it's not allowed. I need to be clever.
Mark, it's so funny you say that because I wrote a book called Marketing So Easy It's Fun Again. So easy, you'll have no excuses. And I say this, marketing comes down to two things. Now, granted, you can get very granular if you want, but for sake of this conversation, we'll keep it simple. It comes down to two things, which is strategic approach and consistency. And I think if you do those two things, you'll show up very well. Now, obviously, you want to integrate the branding component to that. But I wish people would. Some people know the consistency part, and they ignore it from time to time, but they really ignore the strategy part. So I'm curious, when you were talking before about vision, where do you see strategy in that?
Well, actually, what I think is it should be derived from vision. It does need the outside parameters of like, hey, here's the situation, right? It can't just operate on its own vision. Just look at your vision, but you can derive it from there. So if you say like, so my company, our goal is to have 20,000 certified AI branders by 2027. That's the vision that we have. And for them to be, professional, impactors on the profession. And so if I derive my decision, my strategy from that, okay, well, I said certification. I didn't say t-shirts and I didn't say boot camps. I said certification. So that should be the driver. How do I get more certs? So starting from the very beginning, I could say my objective is to certify people. How do I get more certification? Okay, well, you got to get them in the funnel first. They got to believe what you're saying. So you got to make this content. So we're going to come out with these content campaigns that convince people of one, the system, and two, the need to be certified in it. And so now I have my content platform. Okay, well, how do we run the funnel? Well, we want to get them in the door on the concept. So why don't we give them the first step? We'll say you could download the Vision GPT. And if you get the Vision GPT, you're going to realize that it's only one of the 9 pillars that we recommend. And you get the other 9 pillars by enrolling in the course. And the course is just the beginning of the certification. And so now I just derived my entire funnel just from the vision. Now you could do the same thing for sales too, where you say like, okay, well, we need a sales strategy. Okay, well, what are we trying to sell the most of? Well, certifications. Okay, well, we should hire somebody to sell certifications. And then who's going to buy them? Okay, well, let's look at the people who buy certifications and the people who are interested in AI and the people who want to learn about branding. Okay, well now I have all my parameters, so here's the strategy. So anyways, it's basically the concept is that once you set your branding up properly, and we call it the AI brand blueprint, you're going to have these 150 parameters that are then guided through AI to make the rest of your decisions. And so you don't have to say, let's use a bunch of brain power and committee meetings to, figure out things. It's like, no, based on the vision, everything should be this. And if we go outside of this, now we're violating our branding parameters. And even if it does work, it's not going to be done for very long. And that's why you see a lot of companies do this roller coaster where it's like, oh, look, we're successful. Oh, crap. That thing's not selling anymore. Okay, well, let's make another thing. And then it just is a loop, or not loop, up and down. Hopefully up. It doesn't always go up. So that's the trick.
Sure. So I'm curious, one of the things that you have talked about now is you talked about deception. You talked about kind of building trust and safety, right? And then how that kind of plays in AI. And I'm curious, as you look into the future, one of the things that I look at, I totally agree with your concept that I think the human element is going to be more valuable 3 years from now than it even is today, because there's going to be so much deception around AI. And like when I look at AI, where I think it's the most effective is when it's used in a way that is transparent. I think about, there's AI bots that could, call somebody and talk to somebody today. But if I feel like it's a bot, that's going to lower my trust and lower my respect for that brand. If the same, but I interact with AI with brands every day, and I'm okay with it when I know that that's what it is. You see what I'm saying? And I think it's interesting how you kind of piece these things together, because that's what kind of triggered in my head of like, it goes back to the same thing. Like, yes, the human element is going to be more important than ever, but yes, AI is going to streamline stuff that needs to be streamlined, candidly. And right there in the middle, and I think that's what is going to differentiate good brands from bad brands, is which ones are honest.
You know what? You could build a brand dishonestly, and you see brands do it all the time. But my thing is always, because I'm always, I'm actually really religious and spiritual, and so I go through good and evil all the time. I'm always weighing those things, and I always think that any falsehood is actually evil, because the deception that it does isn't just harmful for the person you're telling it to, but you just screwed up their perception of whatever you said. And now they're going to make a bunch of decisions on it. So the effect of lie is actually exponential in terms of the impact, which is what makes it so bad. So for me personally, I won't do that. And I have to be honest. But it's, when I was in college, I actually came up with this concept because I went to this seminar about ethics and morals in business. And the point of it was that it's the most profitable way to be. So it's not just you should be that because you believe in good and not evil. It's more profitable to be good, because if you're good and you take care of your customers and you actually care about them and you take care of the problems and your customer service is good and you innovate because you want your product to improve so your customers are even happier, that's actually going to lead to a longer term business. And so yes, if you can avoid, and that's why, the AI is great as long as it's disclosed, where it's like, hey, I'm Bill, I'm going to help you out with your customer service question. I'm an AI. So keep that in mind, but it's getting so much better now that even if they said that, as long as they're helpful, because everybody makes this qualification like, oh, it has to be humans versus robots. No, it has to be a good service. You violating the economics of a situation because you want humans somewhere doesn't make your situation any better. It probably makes it worse. And now you've, stereotyped that it's going to be better because it's human and not a robot, or vice versa. It doesn't help you. It's inserting your ego into the mix again. It's like, no, did it get done better? Okay, there you go. I always say the same argument with people going green, where it's like, oh, we got to go green to save the planet. But I'm like, if the economics of going green don't make any sense, you're not going to guilt me into violating my logic to make that decision. It just doesn't work. Make it work economically, because that's honest, and I'll do it. But if not, what are you doing? You feel good. You feel good that you influenced people's decisions and violated their free will by forcing them into something because you didn't think it was right. That's wrong. So anyways, I go super
Yeah.
deep on that.
Yeah.
But yeah, disclose, just tell people, if they don't like it, they'll go away, and that's fine. There's lots of people. Just find the right ones.
Totally agree.
So, Mark, in marketing, what do you see next? I mean, outside of AI, obviously that's where everyone's buzzing. That's where I think a lot of the future is going to revolve around. But what do you see in the future of marketing for businesses to be successful?
Oh, you know what? I think it's going to be amazing, because what I see is that a lot of the stuff that takes up a lot of our time is going to be gone. And this siloing effect that we've had for the last 20 years is going to be completely inefficient and wrong. And what I say by that is, what we've basically done is become over reliant on paid media. And then we've put everything else on the back end, and who cares? Where it's like, okay, what about content marketing? What about social media marketing? What about SEO? What about all these different methodologies that we could do? It's basically been like, whatever. As long as we're making all our money from paid media, we'll just focus on that. And then whatever else supports that. Problem now is that what AI is going to do is substantially increase the competition for paid media, because currently the people who operate on paid media know that, hey, if I spend this much, I'm going to get this much. But to get to that point where you realize that you could make money off of paid media, but it costs this much and it could take this much time to figure out, it's just say that's gone. Let's say that I'm Bob the mechanic. I saw Bill down the street spent $500 on ads and he made $600. Oh, that's great. I'll do the same thing. If I can make $100, like, I've wasted way more money on that on worse marketing methods, I'll make $100. Now, how many more businesses are going to jump online and start trying to bid for ads? It's going to be nuts. So what I see happening is that paid media is basically going to be break even or worse, and customer acquisition is going to get really expensive. So the only way to make money is essentially to increase your lifetime customer value by doing a good job, having good products, taking care of the customer. And so that's where I really see it going, where the effect of the competition is actually going to lead to us being better marketers. So marketers at that point could now have an integrative, comprehensive focus that doesn't just worry about getting traffic, because just getting traffic is not going to do anything. We need to integrate all of have a cohesive strategy derived from our vision. And now we can start to operate. And if you actually, instead of doing committee meetings to work on your strategy or do all these different things, and instead just go to the AI and say, hey, based on our branding, based on our current objectives, what should we do? And it just says, here's the plan. And then now you could give that same AI to everybody on the team, insert the plan into it. And now everybody could just query this one place and get exactly what they're supposed to do all the time. And so now and that's just for internal. You could do that with external contractors, outside agencies. Here's the link. Talk to the AI. Make sure it's on brand. Make sure it fits with the rest of the plan. Boom. Now as marketers, we could do the fun part, which is go out and see what's working. I mean, that's really what we enjoy, right? Like, hey, we did all this work. What was the effect? Oh, well, here's your last 10 podcasts, and here's the one that did the best by far. And you're like, I hate that episode.
Yeah.
And then, but now we know how to operate. Now we can do it even better. And so my system is really you just coming up with a strategy, using AI to execute it, have the humans do the human stuff that you have to do right now. And then once you get the result, you feed that back into the AI and you say, hey, here's the result of that strategy. What can we derive from this? And take the impact that it made and put it into the next strategy. And so a lot of things we do are always rotating, like 90-day cycles. And there you go. Now you have your answer. It's going to get easier. It's still a little complicated right now.
So Mark, outside of the AI part and the ads part, which I agree, I think we're already there with ads where it's really hard to do better than break even for someone who's good at it.
Mm-hmm.
So on the organic side, where would you suggest someone spend some of their time and effort on the digital marketing side?
All content, all frameworks. So like if you are doing anything right now, well, if you don't know what to do, let's say you're just like, I just don't know where to start from the beginning. That's what I did. If you go to my website, you'll actually see a dictionary and it has, 150 terms in it. But what I found with AI was that it's very random unless you specify certain things. And so I was like, well, what's a funnel? look it up online. You'll find a million definitions of a funnel. Okay, well, what's an email campaign? A million different email campaign. So what I did was I said, okay, well, I literally have to define every word that has to do with what I'm trying to do before I could utilize AI effectively. And so that's what I tell everybody now. I'm like, hey, unless you're in a technical industry, let's say you're in like med tech or you're in IT, and there are certain terms for everything. Most other industries, though, have wildly different terms for everything. And so what you could do as a business is you could become the resource that defined everything. And then now you're the one that's telling people what everything means. This is how I worked my fitness company, because I found that, if you look up push-up, is push-up spelled 2 words? Is it 1 word? Or is there a hyphen? You don't know, because nobody's decided to define it. So I was like, well, I'm just going to decide. And so I said, most people look it up with a hyphen. So I'm going to spell it with a hyphen. And then I took that syntax and just applied it to every other term that had a similar situation. Now I've standardized it. And now I have a system of naming exercises where nobody else is taking the time to do it. And everybody can do this. Most industries don't even have one company doing this. And so, so if you don't know what to do, define everything you do, and then you take that information and start to apply it to your content. And now you could backlink to the original definition, plus everything you say has way more weight on it because you actually just took the time to do it.
Mark, that is so good. I could talk to you all day about this stuff and just nerd out about marketing tactics and strategies, but thank you for being here. Before we let you go, can you tell our audience a little bit more about the AI Branding Academy and where they can find you?
Yeah, so it's aibranding.academy. Yes, you can get that domain if you want, but it's has all the information. I have tons of free stuff on there. Gets you kind of into the system. My real goal is to standardize the language between marketers and business owners, so we could do more work together without having to argue over dumb crap. And so that's why I'm trying to be the resource where I'm like, hey, let's just all speak the same language. Then we could talk about the fun stuff after. So there's a ton of content, community. We have a podcast, and we're coming out with a magazine next week. And check it out. Try some tools. There's tons of free stuff on there. And then if you want to learn about me, just markdegrasse.com. And I have the same thing. I have a magazine, a podcast, and all of the things. I'm actually behind like 40 episodes. When you said like, oh, it'd be a couple days, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so cool.
Oh, Mark, thank you so much for being here. Awesome episode. For all the listeners out there, if you haven't already, take a moment and do us a huge favor and leave us a review. It only takes a minute, but it makes a major impact. Until next time, we'll see you. Peace.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you for being part of the Hustle Nation. If you're serious about raising the bar in your personal and professional life and willing to go all in on your success, head over to hustleleaders.com. Here you can get access to our Hustle Productivity ebook, attend our Hustle Masterclass, or challenge yourself to the 30-day Hustle Challenge. Pairing these tools and training with the Hustle Nation podcast will help you advance to a whole new level. Until next time, stay hungry and inspire those around you to hustle.